April 17, 1945, a few miles southwest of the German town of Celle. The air is thick with the smell of pine forests, damp earth, and something else, something ancient and sweet and utterly profane. It hangs in the low-lying fog, a miasma that clings to the inside of your throat. For the men of the British 11th Armored Division, it is the smell of a place they will soon call hell on earth, the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. A Bedford QL truck, its canvas sides stained with mud and grime, churns through the muck that passes for a road. Inside, sitting on a hard wooden bench, is Sister Catherine Carter of the Queen Alexandra's Imperial Military Nursing Service. The rhythmic jolting of the truck does little to distract her from the sounds filtering in from outside. A low, continuous moaning that seems to rise from the very ground, punctuated by the sharp crack of a Webley revolver. Another mercy killing. For a horse, she tells herself. It must have been for a horse, but she knows it wasn't. The truck groans to a halt. A young corporal pulls back the canvas flap, his face pale and grim beneath his helmet. "We're here, sister. Compound 2. Catherine swings her legs over the tailgate and drops to the ground, her boots sinking into a slurry of mud and human waste. The scale of the horror she has witnessed over the past 48 hours has numbed her senses, but this is different. This is her assignment. In front of her stands a long, low wooden barracks, no different from the dozens of others that scar the landscape. But this one is not filled with the skeletal, dying inmates. This barracks holds the captors, 50, maybe 60 of them, the female guards of Belsen, the Aufseherinnen. They have been rounded up and segregated here under the watchful eyes of British infantrymen armed with Sten guns. As Catherine approaches, accompanied by Major Alistair Finch of the Royal Army Medical Corps, the women fall silent. They had been talking amongst themselves in low, guttural German, but now, nothing. They simply watch, their eyes following every movement. They are a shocking sight, not because they are emaciated. On the contrary, most appear to have been well fed, but because of the defiant filth that covers them. Their striped prison garb, a cruel irony imposed by their captors, is torn and stained. Their hair is matted, their faces smeared with dirt. Yet, through the grime, their expressions are hard, unbroken, contemptuous. Major Finch, a man whose patience has been worn to a thread by the endless tide of death and disease, addresses them through a weary interpreter. "You are now prisoners of war under the authority of the British Army. You will all undergo a mandatory medical examination for your own safety and for the prevention of disease. Form a line. Now." His words hang in the cold, damp air. Not a single woman moves. They stand in a tight, hostile cluster, their arms crossed, their jaws set. A few of them smirk. One, a blonde woman with chillingly placid blue eyes, spits on the ground near the major's boot. Catherine recognizes her from the intelligence briefings. Irma Grace, barely 21 years old and already infamous, the hyena of Auschwitz. The major's face reddens. This is not a request. He gestures to two of his orderlies, who move forward with their medical bags. As they approach the group, the women shuffle backwards as one, a single organism recoiling. Their silence is more intimidating than any shout. It is a solid wall of refusal. The orderlies stop, uncertain. Catherine steps forward, her voice calm and professional. "We need to check you for typhus, lice. It's for your own health." She looks from one woman to another, trying to find a flicker of understanding, of fear, of anything other than pure, unadulterated hate. She sees nothing. They just stare through her, their gaze of physical force. The air crackles with tension. The British soldiers grip their weapons a little tighter. They are surrounded by tens of thousands of dying souls whom they are desperate to save. And here, in this small corner of the camp, stand a few dozen who desperately need saving but will not permit it. The standoff is absolute, the silence deafening. The days that follow bleed into one another, a gray, relentless cycle of work and exhaustion. For Catherine Carter and the RAMC staff, time is measured in ampules of saline and piles of burial shrouds. The main camp, the so-called horror camp, is a vortex of human suffering that consumes every ounce of their energy. They work until they drop, fueled by mugs of syrupy tea and grim determination, fighting a losing battle against typhus, typhoid, and starvation. The human laundry is in full operation, a repurposed stable where teams of German medical students are forced to scrub the emaciated bodies of inmates, trying to wash away the lice and the filth that carry the pestilence. Yet, just a few hundred yards away in Compound 2, time has frozen. The standoff with the female guards has not broken. It has solidified. The women remain a silent, cohesive unit of defiance.
They accept the meager rations of black bread and soup pushed through the barracks door, but nothing more. They refuse to speak to the British. They refuse to be cleaned, and they absolutely refuse to be examined. Major Finch is at his wit's end. "Damn them," he mutters to Catherine one evening, rubbing his bloodshot eyes. "I have men dying, good men, catching typhus from the lice crawling off these bloody corpses, and those creatures are probably crawling with it. They could start an epidemic inside the wire." He had considered using force, having armed guards restrain them one by one for delousing and inspection, but the prospect was a nightmare. It would be a violent, ugly struggle, draining precious manpower from the rescue effort. And for whom? For women who had presided over this very slaughterhouse. The moral calculus was dizzying. From a distance, Catherine watches them. Through the grimy window of their barracks, she sees their strange, self-contained world. They have established their own hierarchy. Irma Grease and the older, more severe-looking Elizabeth Fulkenrath seem to be in command. They enforce a rigid, unspoken discipline. The women move with a shared purpose, huddling together for warmth against the damp chill, sharing their rations with a cold, formal equity. They never seem to sleep. Whenever Catherine looks, she sees watchful eyes staring back. She begins to notice the small things, the way they turn their backs to the door when using the overflowing latrine bucket in the corner, a pathetic attempt at privacy in a world stripped of all dignity. The way they meticulously groom each other's hair, not for cleanliness, but in a ritual of solidarity, picking out lice with a chilling meticulousness. They are building a fortress, not of wood and wire, but of shared contempt and pathological secrecy. Their bodies, their filth, their sickness, it is the last territory they control, and they will not cede it. The tension finally snaps on the fourth day. A scream cuts through the low murmur of the camp. Catherine and two orderlies run toward the women's barracks. A crowd of guards has gathered near the entrance. Pushing through, Catherine sees one of the younger German women on the ground, convulsing, her face flushed with a high fever. Her body is rigid, her eyes rolled back in her head, a classic symptom of advanced typhus. "Get back, give her air," Catherine commands, kneeling beside the girl. She reaches for her medical bag, preparing a sedative. As her fingers touch the girl's forehead to feel the heat, a hand clamps down on her wrist, hard. She looks up into the face of Elizabeth Fulkenrath. The woman's eyes are chips of ice. She says nothing, but her grip is a vice. Then the other women close in, forming a tight, menacing circle around the fallen girl. They shoulder Catherine and the orderlies backward, physically blocking them. Two of them lift their sick comrade, her limbs flailing, and carry her away from the light of the doorway, back into the suffocating darkness of the barracks' far corner. The wall of silence has just become a physical barricade. They would rather let one of their own die than allow an enemy to touch her.
The incident with the convulsing guard changes the dynamic. Major Finch is furious. "That's it," he snarls, pacing in the makeshift command post. "Tomorrow morning, I'm sending in a platoon from the light infantry. We'll drag them out one by one if we have to. This insubordination ends now." But even as he says it, Catherine can see the reluctance in his face. The image of British soldiers, liberators, physically brawling with unarmed female prisoners, no matter how monstrous those prisoners were, is an image no one wants to create. It feels like a contamination, another layer of violence in a place already saturated with it. Catherine says nothing. She is too tired to argue. The work with the survivors is taking its toll. Each day she cleanses skeletal bodies, dresses sores that defy medical description, and holds the hands of people whose names she will never know as they whisper their last words in Polish, Hungarian, or Dutch. She feels her own humanity fraying at the edges, worn thin by the sheer, overwhelming scale of the suffering. In the evenings, she finds herself drawn back to the window of the women's barracks, not out of morbid curiosity, but out of a kind of professional puzzle. She forces herself to look past the SS lightning bolts tattooed on their arms, past the monstrous reputation that precedes them. She sees girls, some of them teenagers, who look as lost and terrified as the young British recruits guarding them. They are gaunt now, the camp's meager rations and spreading sickness whittling away at their once healthy frames. Their bravado is cracking. She sees it in the furtive glances they cast at the British medical tents, in the way they clutch their stomachs. They are sick, they are scared, and they are proud. It is a toxic, volatile combination. Her gaze settles on one woman, not one of the infamous leaders, but a quiet, mousy-faced brunette who always stays at the edge of the group. One afternoon, Catherine watches as this woman, believing she is unobserved, finds a small piece of broken mirror in the mud. For a long moment, she just stares at her own reflection. Her face is a mask of self-loathing.
She sees the grime, the matted hair, the sunken eyes. She sees what she has become. The woman then takes a small, tattered piece of cloth and, using a trickle of water from a rusty pipe, begins to try and wash her face. It is a desperate, futile act of self-preservation. Two of her comrades see what she is doing. They don't mock her. Instead, they stand on either side of her, holding up a filthy blanket to shield her from the view of the British guards. It's a shield, a curtain, an assertion of privacy in the most public of hells. And in that moment, something clicks for Catherine. She has been seeing this as a military problem, a matter of discipline and control. So has Major Finch. They have been trying to breach a fortress wall with force. But what if it isn't a fortress? What if it's a cage of shame? They have been stripped of everything: their power, their freedom, their uniforms, their ideology. All they have left is sovereignty over their own bodies. The medical examination, in their eyes, is not a procedure for health. It is the final, intimate violation. A public, clinical stripping down by the enemy. A surrender they are not willing to make. It's not defiance, she realizes. Not entirely. It's modesty. A twisted, pathological modesty born of utter humiliation. They are refusing to be treated like animals on display. The solution, then, might not be more force. It might be less. She looks again at the two women holding the blanket, creating a tiny private space in the vast, open horror of Belsen. An idea begins to dawn, so simple and so profoundly unmilitary that it just might work. She turns away from the window and walks with a new sense of purpose towards the Major's tent.
Major Finch listens, his brow furrowed in skepticism. Catherine lays out her idea, her voice steady despite her bone-deep exhaustion. She doesn't talk about psychology or shame. She speaks the practical language of a nurse. She tells him what she observed. She doesn't ask for an infantry platoon. She doesn't ask for restraints or threats. "I need blankets, sir," she says simply. "Army blankets, and a few balls of twine." The Major stares at her as if she's gone mad. "Blankets? Sister, I have 50,000 people freezing to death who need blankets. What on earth are you going to do with blankets?" "Create a space," she replies. "That's all. Just give me 6 blankets and some string, and one other nurse. No guards, no orderlies. Let us try." He wants to refuse. It sounds absurd, a waste of precious time and resources. But his own plan felt wrong, and he knows it. He looks at this young nurse, her face smudged with dirt but her eyes clear and determined. For 2 days she has worked without complaint, wading into horrors that would break most men. He owes her the chance to be wrong. "All right, Carter," he sighs, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Take what you need, but if this doesn't work, we do it my way at dawn." An hour later, Catherine and a fellow nurse, a quiet but steady woman named Helen, walk towards Barracks 21. They don't carry medical kits. Their hands are full with coarse gray wool blankets and spools of thick twine. The ever-present British guards at the perimeter watch them go, their expressions a mixture of confusion and pity. As Catherine pushes open the creaking door, the low murmur of German inside ceases instantly. 60 pairs of eyes fix on them, filled with suspicion and hostility. The air is foul, thick with the stench of sickness and unwashed bodies. Catherine and Helen ignore the prisoners. They walk to the center of the long room as if the hostile women aren't even there. Their movements are calm, deliberate, and purposeful. Catherine hands one end of the twine to Helen. They stretch it across the width of the barracks, about 7 feet up, tying it to exposed wooden beams on either side. The German women watch in absolute silence, their heads turning in unison to follow the strange activity. What is this? Some new form of humiliation? A preparation for a mass hanging? Then, Catherine takes the first blanket. She folds the top edge over the taut twine and, using smaller pieces of string, secures it like a shower curtain. She repeats the process with a second blanket, then a third. Slowly, methodically, they construct a series of small, private cubicles in the middle of the open barracks. The only sounds are the scrape of their boots on the filthy floorboards, the pull of the twine, and the soft rustle of wool. It is a strangely domestic, peaceful activity in the heart of a war zone. It is utterly incongruous. When they are finished, 3 makeshift examination rooms stand in the center of the barracks, each shielded on 3 sides from view. The space is transformed. It is no longer just one large exposed cage. It now contains a place of privacy. Catherine and Helen then carry in 2 simple wooden stools and a basin of clean, warm water, placing them inside one of the curtained areas. Their work is done. Catherine turns to face the silent prisoners. She looks directly at Elizabeth Fulkenrath, the unspoken leader of the group.
She doesn't issue an order. She doesn't make a threat. Her expression is neutral, professional. She simply makes a small, quiet gesture with her hand, a slight nod of her head towards the nearest curtain stall. It is an invitation. The entire room holds its breath. The fate of this strange, desperate gambit hangs on the next move.
The silence in the barracks stretches into a minute, then two. It is a thick, suffocating silence, filled with the unspoken weight of pride, fear, and disease. The German women look at the blankets, then at Catherine, then at their own leader, Elizabeth Volkenrath. Her face is a stone mask, impossible to read. This is the critical moment. A single word from her, a shake of the head, and the wall of defiance will remain impenetrable. Catherine holds her gaze, her heart pounding against her ribs. She keeps her own expression placid, betraying nothing of the tension coiling in her stomach. She simply waits. This is not a battle of wills anymore. It is an offering. Take it or leave it. Volkenrath's cold eyes scan the room, assessing her charges. She sees the feverish flush on the cheeks of the younger ones, sees the subtle tremor in their hands, hears the dry, rattling coughs they can no longer suppress. She sees the girl who collapsed, now slumped against a wall, barely conscious. Her gaze returns to Catherine, and then to the simple curtain of gray wool. It represents a concession, a surrender of sorts. But it is also something else, a recognition, a small, almost imperceptible nod to a dignity they thought was lost forever. Finally, she breaks the silence, not with a speech, but with a short, guttural command in German. She jerks her head toward the girl who had collapsed earlier. Two other women help the sick girl to her feet. She is unsteady, her legs barely holding her. Slowly, hesitantly, she shuffles across the floorboards toward the first cubicle. She stops at the entrance, her hand hovering over the edge of the blanket as if she expects it to burn her. She glances back at Volkenrath, who gives another sharp, impatient nod. Taking a shuddering breath, the young woman pushes the blanket aside and disappears behind it. A collective sigh seems to pass through the room, a release of tension so palpable it feels like a physical wave. Catherine waits a few moments, giving the girl time, then picks up her medical bag and follows her inside. Behind the curtain, the world shrinks. The hostile stares and the suffocating atmosphere of the main room are gone. It is just the two of them. The girl sits on the stool, trembling, her eyes fixed on the floor. Catherine works quickly and efficiently, her movements gentle. She speaks in a low, calm voice, not expecting an answer. She checks the girl's temperature, listens to her chest, examines the telltale rash of typhus beginning to spread across her torso. She dabs the girl's forehead with a cloth dipped in the warm water. There is no resistance, no defiance, only a weary, pathetic submission. When Catherine emerges 10 minutes later, she finds a line has formed, a silent, orderly queue of German women waiting outside the other cubicles. Volkenrath is at the front, her arms crossed, her expression still grim, but she is waiting her turn. The fever of defiance has broken. One by one, for the rest of the day and into the night, the women of Belsen enter the makeshift rooms and allow themselves to be examined. The medical findings are grim. Almost every single one is infested with lice. Over half show advanced symptoms of typhus. Many suffer from dysentery, malnutrition, and festering sores from the filth. The treatment can finally begin. The delousing powder can be distributed, the meager medicines administered. It is not a victory in the traditional sense. There is no joy in it. It is simply the grim, necessary work of staving off death, even for those who had so mercilessly dealt it. As dawn breaks, Catherine stands outside the barracks, breathing in the cold morning air. The strange, silent battle is over. It wasn't one with guns or orders or threats of force. It was one with 6 wool blankets and a piece of string. It was won by a simple, profound act of understanding, that even in the deepest pit of inhumanity, the need to not be seen, the need for a private space to be vulnerable, remains one of the last, most fiercely guarded bastions of the self.